Obviously, that was a sprint through investment banking. I think the key thing to know within investment banking is no matter how much you read, your best and most fertile learning is within the walls of an investment bank. When I got my first job in corporate development or investment banking 20 plus years ago, it was really almost an apprenticeship program. I had my master's, but what I learned about how to do investment banking came with spending time with the senior partners and with the people that had been doing it forever. So even today, as you look at most people that work in private equity, most people that work in venture capital, they came up through the investment banking apprenticeship program at a bulge bracket, a middle market, or a boutique bank. What we do most of the time in our hiring is the young people that we have, the analysts and associates, come up through the internship program. And then the more senior people are relationships that we've known for a long time, and we work with them to really make sure that there is a cultural fit to have them join as partners. The whole concept of investment banking, some say it's the second oldest profession. People have been doing deals, helping others do deals, and making a market for many thousands of years. Some people over the last 15 years, as we're quote unquote gone to a paperless society, have said that investment banking or the business of investment banking will go away. What I believe is that there will always be a need for a wise person to give wise counsel. So if all we're doing is crunching numbers, then yes, maybe you can outsource that to India or China, where someone for a fraction of the value that we provide and extract can do just the financial analysis. What we believe investment banking, it's the relationship and it's the wisdom to be able to say at a negotiating table when $50 million is at play on a specific point, that we have worked that point, understood that point countless times from other transactions, and we're able to say, here's why we think it should be resolved in this direction. Or if the other side comes up with a complicated point, you can't just do a numerical analysis and say, we're going to get back to you. You have to be able to accumulate the knowledge that you have to date, ask some questions, and make a recommendation or negotiate the point as best possible for your client. So those are some thoughts on investment banking, obviously very much a primer. Networking, I had lunch today with a gentleman that was the former president of two public companies, New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, over 7,000 employees total, doing business on 6 continents. And the second gentleman was just had the opportunity to sell his business for more than $2 billion. In neither case did I walk away from that lunch with a project in hand, but I walked away with a better understanding of what they're thinking, what they have learned, what they are seeking to do, and trying to think through how can we help in the future. Every interaction that we have, whether it's with a janitor, the president, a politician, a CEO, a classmate, we have to make sure that we have the right attitude. And the right attitude is the habit of networking. It's not something that you can do for a few minutes here and a few minutes there. It's a lifestyle. Oftentimes, my teenage sons just shake their head as we are at a movie theater, or we're at a ball game, or we're at a hockey rink, and all of a sudden I'm off talking to someone that I had met years earlier, and I'm nurturing the relationship. I'm asking, what are they up to? I'm trying to see how I can help. So if you begin with the end in mind, and I think a big part of the end in mind is thinking through, what do you want to accomplish in your life? Do you want to be a CEO? Do you want to help people have a better world? Do you want to be an orthopedic surgeon? So figuring out what is your end in mind, and then having an attitude of gratitude. So having a positive attitude. If I'm interacting with someone, whether it's a junior person or a senior person, and I enjoy the interaction, then it's easy for me to interact with them again. If they call and ask for a favor, if they call and are desiring to chat, I'm going to make time for them. If it's a grumpy person that's difficult to be around and I'm swamped, which is what I normally am, there's less likelihood I'm going to take time to speak with them. If the person that I am is someone that's giving rather than taking, then more than likely when I call up a friend and ask for help, they're going to give me the help. We worked on a large transaction a few months ago, a 9-figure deal. And one of the key things that we walked away was, from doing our due diligence, we discovered that all of the potential buyers desired a certain thing for their business. And that certain thing was a hospital, and they desired to partner with more orthopedic surgeons. Because I had relationships with orthopedic surgeons, I was able to ask questions and figure out what would be a motivation for them to partner with the hospital. If I hadn't had those historic relationships, it wouldn't have been an easy or appropriate approach or ask to have the opportunity to connect those orthopedic surgeons to our client, and therefore, in the end, have a successful transaction. So, starting with the end in mind, give more than you take, build and nurture relationships. What I mean by build and nurture relationships, it's not that I need something today, therefore I'm going to try to help someone and then call them tomorrow and say, hey, can you help me in return? I have a very deep bank of relationships that I've developed over the last many years. And I've kept in contact. I was just in Vancouver, and I met with 5 different CEOs that have been friends for years and years and years. But while I was on vacation, I took the time to buy them lunch or to drive down to Seattle and get together with them. I took the time to build and nurture the relationships. I wasn't looking for anything from any of them. I was just building the relationship. But more than once in the past, I've needed help on a project, and I've been able to reach out to those 5 and many others to say, tell me about SATCOM communication. Tell me about 3D additive manufacturing. Tell me about whatever it might be. So how do you build your network? I think the key thing, the number one thing, is to do an inventory of who you know right now. One of my favorite professors at grad school was Dr. Gert Manian. Dr. Gert Manian had been the chief detente for economics in Moscow for the Nixon administration. He was a very young guy back then, but he maintained his Communist Party relationships, and many years later was one of the first people to bring in CEOs into Russia and to China to do relationship building and building of business relationships. And what he said to us was, take a look left, take a look right. Who are your classmates? Get to know them. Get to know the people that you're actually interacting with today. Calling up Peter or calling up David after this webinar and saying, hey, I want to be your new best friend, probably isn't as successful or doesn't have as great a chance of happening and moving forward as looking at who do you know already and investing in those relationships. I graduated from grad school 25 years ago, and some of my classmates who were as equally clueless as I was 25 years ago are now the CEOs of multinational companies. One of them is the CEO of a major footwear company. Another is the CEO of the largest importer in the Middle East in a specific segment. I didn't know those guys were going to be great successes, but I continued relationship long after just having classes with them in grad school. So look at your immediate relationships. When I say immediate relationships, I'm not just talking about yours. I'm talking about your brothers, your sisters, your parents, your uncles, your aunts, your neighbors. If you take the time to begin with the end in mind, and when you go to your parents or your neighbor or your best friend's father and say, here's what I've got as an end in mind, can you help me? My experience is 90% of the time they're willing to help you. The second thing is be where people are. So take the time to figure out where are networking events happening. Most organizations, particularly in the mergers and acquisitions area, the chief among them, the Association for Corporate Growth, have student membership. It's in many cities less than $100. And that allows you to go to their events. If you walk the floor and ask people about themselves, they are more than happy 90% of the time to help. The next thing is conferences. You never know who you can meet at a conference. And it's imperative to take the time to do the pre-reading to understand who's going to be there and what are they about. So one of the things that I practiced for over 20 years is before a speaker gets up to speak, I seek them out. And I introduce myself and I tell them why I'm excited to hear them speak. So I take the time to pre-read to understand what are they going to speak about and what's different. If you talk to them after they've spoken, there's going to be 50 other people in line and your conversation is going to be about 5 seconds. There's oftentimes I've been invited to sit with them at lunch ahead of their speech because I was the only one that approached them. And in many cases, they know nobody at the conference. So they are happy to have a new friend at that conference. The next thing is extracting information from others. This would probably more than likely be later in your career, but there's also aspects of it that you can do as you're building your network. It's doing enough research to have captured some level of knowledge or expertise and sharing that new knowledge or expertise with the person. So you're priming the pump. You're helping them by giving them knowledge. What you're always looking for when you're trying to gain knowledge about a particular area is ask questions in such a way that they really are doing you a favor by helping you out. But if you ask the right person the right question at the right time, a lot of buts, a lot of them are willing to share. When I was in grad school, I met with close to 100 executives, and I believe it was 8 CEOs of large multinational companies like Pennzoil and Texaco and Citigroup, senior executives, even up to the president. The reason was, all I was asking was, tell me about your career and what advice you can give me. How can I accomplish as much as possible? I remember going downtown LA, because I went to Pepperdine, and meeting with the CEO of a large organization, and I asked him 10 questions. And he said, let me take you for lunch. And I always tried to pay for lunch. And he took me to one of the fanciest restaurants in LA. And by God's grace, there was no way that that waiter was going to give me the bill, because he knew this tip that I was going to give him versus the tip the CEO was going to give him was incredibly different. But that CEO treated me extraordinarily graciously and invested time and energy, and eventually came out and spoke at Pepperdine to the MBA students. And we hosted them at Alice's restaurant on the pier, made famous in the I'm not sure, Rolling Stone song or something, and had a great opportunity to learn from the guy. And his bodyguard and chauffeur drove me around with him, and it was absolutely comical. But again, I took the time to ask questions about them, and I learned about them, and I remembered it. And each time I talked to them, I applied the accumulated knowledge. So one of the things I forgot to mention is, you're acquiring all this knowledge, make sure that you invest in a process to capture your learning. So if you don't write down who the person is, their children's name, their wife's name, the little facts that they drop in the conversation, where they went to undergrad, grad school, their friends, the key learnings that they had, their original mentors. If you remember those things, they were going to be delighted to talk to you. If the conversation goes something like, hey, tell me about your wife. What was your wife's name again? They're going to be thinking, the little crapper didn't listen to me last time. Why should I spend more time with him this time? So, questions. We spent 30 minutes of your life giving you a few insights on the learnings of a analyst, summer analyst, the learnings on a very brief primer on investment banking, and then 15 minutes on networking.
Thanks so much, guys, for listening in. The way it's going to work is hopefully you have a Twitter open or your smartphone ready. Tweet at the Malibu Group your questions, and Peter will be here to answer them. So Peter, do you have anything to start?
So I think the best advice I got as I was coming up through the investment banking system was understand the cost. So my first week or weeks in doing what I was doing, I was working around the clock, sometimes putting in 100, 105, 110 hours a week. And if I wasn't absolutely convinced that this is the direction I wanted to go, I would have never have done it. So if you want to go into investment banking, understand how difficult it is to have a career in investment banking. Realize most investment bankers are willing to eat their young, and you would be considered their young. So if you're not able to produce for them, they're going to want to keep moving, and they are not going to retain you or invest in you. But if you're willing to work hard and provide them assistance and help, then they are going to want to work with you. So make sure you understand what you're looking at when you think you want to go into investment banking. Another question that was posed was on the whole area of does it make sense financially? So starting out as a summer intern, vast majority of them, you're going to be doing it for free. So you're going to be slave labor for 12 weeks. The next section is being an analyst. Starting analyst pay is probably going to be somewhere between $3,500 and $100K. At the bulge bracket, you're going to be making a lot of money. At a boutique, you're going to be investing in your future. When you become an associate, a manager, a director, you can make many hundreds of thousands of dollars. A big part of that, though, is based upon performance. The saying that I always heard as a young guy was eat what you kill. And no one ever really explained eat what you kill. And eat what you kill means if you land a project, if you help land a project, you get to work on that project. And if at the end of the project paid the firm $2 million, then you will probably be allocated some percentage of that $2 million above and beyond your salary. Some of them are based upon bonus. If you help the firm close a $2 million deal and a $2 million deal and another $5 million deal, then you're probably going to be up for a huge bonus. But as you go up the food chain, becoming a vice president and a managing director and a partner, then you're going to be getting a piece of that huge value add. So that's some on compensation.
Thank you, Peter. Looks like we're still looking for some brave soul to ask their mind, share their mind. Use this, Peter, as a valuable asset. Not every day that you get this sort of access to such a great mind. So we have a couple more minutes left. I guess.
So one other thought for you. Thanks for taking the time to participate. As David said, we normally get have in the past 300-400 applications for unpaid summer interns. There have been times in the past that the minimum criteria has been a 3.8 GPA or higher. The idea that David shared was relationship based. So I've known David for 10 plus years. And he was able to cut through a lot of the criteria and clutter of the process, and has turned out to be one of the top 5 interns that we've ever had. So it's not necessarily just getting a freebie. We've also had kids from the University of Chicago and other top schools that were friends of mine's kids who didn't quite understand what was totally necessary. And when I say totally necessary, I mean throwing yourself into the endeavor, having a humble attitude, being willing to do whatever it takes. So I wish all of you good luck. Thanks for taking the time to participate. And that's it.
Thanks so much, guys, for listening in. Hope you guys have a great day. Thanks, Peter.